So in the sprint, in writing user stories, usually business analysts will write user stories as well. But in your case, do you do some writing of the user stories?
I do a little bit, yeah. I would say in other parts of our company and outside of our company, business analysts write more so than I personally do, but I do write a little bit.
Gotcha. So the role of the business analyst when I used to do business analysis work, so writing the user stories, but really even in the user stories there is a need for further elaboration, right? Just the who, what, and why. Sometime depending on the company, they want a little bit more than that. So there might be a need for a wireframe or a process diagram or a prototype, right?
Yep.
Or some sort of description of a functionality, a little bit more elaboration, some screenshot, right?
Yeah, screenshot, some document that explains the why, why this feature is even needed or added. A lot of the stories that I write and one of my product owners writes kind of gives a little bit of background on that. Hey, this person approved for this update for this feature at this time. And that's more for documentation purposes because in the pharmaceutical ag company science, there's potential for you to get audited by governments in case something goes wrong.
Yeah.
I think in the IT space, you're a little bit safer than the business side, but just in case, you never know. Our company is really big on documentation, so any little bit of that that is important to that story typically gets added in our case.
Yeah, I mean, the space like you in pharmaceutical and ag science where you're doing innovation, that's a lot of different private sectors and even government sector are trying to sue you. So you make a small mistake that's multi-million dollar in like suing, right? So in compliance and regulatory stuff, there is need for documentation. And in Agile, a lot of the times they say, oh, we do lightweight documentation or no documentation. That's not true. You need lightweight documentation, and teams will need to have sufficient documentation not to get fined or sued.
Here's our reason why we produce this feature, right?
Yeah, and then the other thing is, as somebody with the Agile mindset, you could always challenge. A lot of the times there are processes where there's 20 pages of documentation. You could always say, hey, could we have a little bit leaner version of this documentation? You're definitely allowed to do that, but some sort of documentation might be needed. So Zach, let's just hear about some of the challenges that you've had in this role. So what are some 2-3 challenges would you say you have?
Yeah, one of my biggest challenges was for me was knowing exactly what I needed to do. In my particular role, from my experience, there are certain things that they do, but outside of those, it's kind of what you make it.
Sure. Can you give us what are those certain things like?
Writing user stories, kind of learning the business process. And I would say being that end user for the dev team.
End user for the dev team. Got you.
Yeah.
So representing end users.
Yep, exactly.
And then gathering requirements from them, right? And then translating that into user stories, or like you said, having user story where you can the user story can point to the requirements and you write those requirements. So those are the base things that you do. And outside of that, what does whatever you make means?
Yeah, because that on a sprint basis or a day-to-day basis is not a whole lot, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
We have requirements gatherings every 2 weeks, meetings, and those are only an hour.
Okay.
So outside of that, outside of creating some sort of documentation, it's really kind of up in the air in what you do, and every business analyst does it differently. So that for me was a little bit difficult going in, because I kind of, especially with my first role, having no experience, I wanted it kind of lined out. Here's what you need to do. Here's your priority. So that was a big challenge, just kind of being willing to take that uncertainty, learn from the person that was training me, learn from others within the company, and just being open and honest with my manager. Hey, here's what's going on. Is this right? Do you need me to be doing something else?
Got you. How did you go about solving that challenge in terms of defining that role, however you wanted to do? What are some activities, or what are some conversations you had? How were you proactive?
The biggest thing I did was set up meetings with other business analysts within the company that I knew of, and just said, hey, I'm new. I don't have much experience. From your perspective, what does this role entail? What do you do? And just let them talk.
Got you. And then also one thing you remember is you were new to agriculture science, and you're new to pharmaceutical, but you have some experience. They kind of knew that you have some experience, right? So it's a completely acceptable thing that, hey, I'm new to agriculture science. So if you have no experience, obviously you're trying to learn the processes.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is you have to be willing to learn. Is one of the biggest to that interview question, and how to convey that even with no experience that I'm valuable. One of the biggest things is, hey, I want to learn. I'm willing to learn, and just give me whatever information I need to learn. You don't need to teach it. You know, just be willing to go learn and be proactive about it.
Yeah. So and I can kind of share that question from my perspective. Some of the things that I did is I learned about a process, and it was fairly complicated. I was able to grasp about 60 to 70% because I was just going through it for the first time. I just looked at some of the process flow diagrams. What I did is I actually let's say it's a payment processing method, right? So I went and researched on that process. I talked to another team member and asked them, okay, what's your general perspective on this? Can you give me more on this product? The other thing that I did is instead of going to another person saying that, I know nothing about the product, I actually went with, okay, well, here's my understanding about the product. And I actually digged in a little bit deeper, saying, hey, can you tell me more about this part? I'm having a little hard time understanding this. And then the mindset behind that, Zach, is that whenever you go with some kind of preparation, people really appreciate you. And you can always do that because that's in your control. Every team will have some sort of process documentation. The challenge is when you don't read anything, and when you say, I don't know anything, I'm new, then obviously they're not gonna keep you on the team for long. Or that's a strikeout, right? That's like you're communicating your mindset that you cannot take initiative. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. We will sure to come back with more exciting videos on Agile topics.